I have a lot of ideas. Sometimes they're bad, sometimes they're good. This is probably a bad one. I'm going to use my tractor to lift up the front corner of my Lexus to see if I can do a flex test like this. Terrible freaking idea. I'm going to set the phone down and show you guys the aftermath once I total my new truck. All right, so I'm hesitant to say it worked because that's scary, but I did pick the truck off the ground and that back tire is just barely on the ground. So the tractor could barely do it. I could take the bucket off actually, and it could lift it even easier, which I'll probably do. You can see that I don't have a super good lift angle because I'm trying to keep the rope away from the fender. I'm gonna let it come forward about 7 inches. But you know, that's picking up a lot more than a quarter of the weight of the truck because that tire is totally unloaded. So it's picking up about half the weight of the truck with just a piece of old Amsteel winch cable and an old ratchet strap. It's pretty terrifying. Yeah. All right, so I reset a little bit because I wouldn't be able to repeat this measurement from both sides. The way I'm determining it's at full flex is when this tire has no weight on it. And by that I mean it starts to slide. I saw it slide back a few inches, so there's not a whole lot of weight on it. Measured it, it's at full down travel. So what we're gonna do now is look at the bump stops, try not to get crushed. Also, I'm worried if it fell right now, it would slam into the tractor, so that's not great either. All right, so in the rear, you see that bump stop is under quite a lot of compression. Maybe not full compression, but it's definitely squeezed. And I do have those longer bump stops on here. So that's costing me a little bit of rear travel for now. But once I put new rear shocks and bigger tires, it won't really matter. And it is touching that bump stop. I don't think it's at full compression, but it's definitely kissing it. So that's pretty good. Most Toyotas, you wouldn't get that out of the front end. All right, now we're gonna take a measurement from a repeatable location to the ground. And a repeatable location on the suspension, so somewhere on the control arm. So let's get a tape measure. Pretty good amount of lean, but not too bad because of KDSS. All right, so what do we want to measure from? Let's measure from the center of that bolt on the control arm to the ground. That'll be a good reference point after I start to change things. You can see that axle is way up and that A-arm is way down. Very cool. Excellent. All right, I'm gonna take this measurement, trying to get killed. So say again, from the center of the bolt to the ground. All right, so that measurement comes out at 23 inches for this side. Let's see what we get on the other side. Also, let's look what KDSS is doing. Wow, look at that. The control arm's control arm. The sway bar is almost touching the skid plate. It's dropped down so far. That'll be interesting to see once we get it flexed out the other way. Interestingly enough, we do have a pretty big difference in flex. That was 23, this is 21.5 inches. Both measured to that center bolt on the bracket. That's how the KDSS sway bar looks now. So you can see that it's doing its job. It looks very different than it did before. And I'm gonna set it back down because this is making me have anxiety. And the way that I decided that it was at full flex was when this tire broke traction. So the parking brake is on and I was pulling a little bit of an angle to not hit my fenders with the rope. So when this tire came off the ground completely, it started to pivot around that tire because this tire obviously had a lot less weight on it. So that's what I called full flex. If you were doing a ramp type test, you would go into, there's literally no weight on this tire, not just till there was not enough weight to break traction. So that's not as repeatable. This test is nowhere near as good as like a CTI test, but it's really funny. Before I forget, the distance from that lower sway bar bracket bolt to the ground static is 8.5 inches, driver and passenger. So yeah. All right, so here's the numbers from the, I'll call it the tractor flex test. It's my Excel file I keep throwing it into. So this is totally stock. I haven't done the 1 inch lift yet. I'm gonna do this again after. These numbers are pretty different from when I was flexing it out in the hill, and there's a couple of good reasons for that. First of all, this is on totally flat ground, so it should be more repeatable. Second of all, my driveway is slightly downhill, and I am picking up the front end. So that's also changing how the center of gravity is leaning over the axles a little bit. But most importantly, where I measured from was different. So I didn't measure from the tires. Ideally, you'd be measuring suspension travel at the ball joint. That's not real convenient to do with the wheels on the truck. So I picked an easy spot to measure that is not quite at the ball joint. So in reality, there's actually more flex than you're seeing in these numbers, which is why these flex numbers are a good bit smaller than my other numbers. Also, I didn't go until the tire was completely off the ground. I just went until the setup I was using was beginning to get unstable and the tires were starting to slide. So the tire is going to have not enough normal force to start sliding way before it's off the ground. So these numbers should not be compared to my other flex video, but I think they should be useful for doing a comparison of relative flex before and after I do a 1-inch lift kit. All that to say, I got a total flex with the passenger wheel in the air of 14.5 inches, combining front and rear. And I got a total flex with the driver's wheel in the air of 13 inches. So that's a 1.5 inch delta. Some of that's probably error in my measurements and my setup, not being able to get the back tire completely off the ground. So doing this with ramps would probably be better. I don't have any ramps, so I'm trying to do the best I can with what I got. My theory for why it's a little different is because KDSS works by having one sway bar link that can basically become disconnected. It can pogo stick. It's a hydraulic cylinder that goes limp. But the other sway bar link is fixed. Well, the passenger wheels are closer to that fixed sway bar link. So they're a little bit more affected by the sway bar, even when the other side is disconnected. That's my theory. I don't know if it's true or not, and I would be kind of surprised if Toyota engineered this imbalance in there. They're smarter than that. But that is my theory anyways, because basically when one sway bar link disconnects, the sway bar is pivoting about the fixed link. But just my theory here. And because right now in stock form, I have a pretty big imbalance of up travel over down travel because the truck sits very low. On up travel, you hit the bump stop pretty quickly, but on down travel, it can keep dropping down farther and farther. So when you switch sides with this asymmetrical sway bar thing going on, maybe it changes the flex. I don't know. The way to figure that out would be to disconnect the sway bar and repeat this. I may do that tomorrow. I'm also going to take these same measurements again tomorrow and make sure that these numbers are fairly repeatable. I think they should be because I marked on the driveway where the truck was parked. And the only thing I don't have great control of is the distance from the wheel to the tractor. I don't have a way to measure that while I'm on it, but I can kind of eyeball the angle of the strap, so I'll try to keep that about the same. And we will see how repeatable it is. I'll obviously, say it again, I should get some ramps, but that's probably not going to happen anytime soon. That'd be a lot of welding.